A very good evening to everyone who has joined us today for the special panel discussion on international lawfare, prospects and challenges for a rising India, organized by the RRU Center for International Law.
Mr. Arpan Chakravarti.
Hello, sir.
He's
Am I audible?
yes.
In that case, may I invite you to give your presentation?
Namaskar, everyone. I am Arpan Chakravarti. I am a student of law, national security, and foreign affairs. And currently, I am a research officer at the Peninsula Foundation, Chennai. It's a research based think tank in India. And today, it gives me a great pleasure to give my presentation here on the subject of Xi Jinping thought on rule of law in front of such an august gathering. And in this 7 minutes, which have been allotted to me, I shall try to do justice to the research paper that I had written on this emerging subject. And a few years ago, when I started my research on lawfare, I was being told that it's just a buzz, it's a legal buzzword. And since then, I had consistently asked myself that this particular question: that is it really a buzzword? So, on researching more on this particular issue, I came across the realization that lawfare have been practiced since ages. Hugo Grotius, the father of international law, was at one point of time appointed by the Dutch East India Company to devise a case against the Portuguese who dominated the spice trade at that point of time. His research against the Portuguese government solidified and also accomplished various contemporary ideas of what we understand today as freedom of navigation, high seas, and others. So, what Hugo Grotius at that point of time accomplished using law that was something which the Dutch military power couldn't. So even in the contemporary conflict that we see, how we justify our actions in international law matter more than anything else, such as Russia terming their action on Ukraine as a special military operations, while India at that point of time has taken a stance that it is a conflict, while majority of the Western nations and NATO would term it as an invasion or an occupation. And therefore, according to my limited understanding of lawfare, I do understand that it has always been there. It's just that now that we are seeing how laws are being used to force the future by using the strategy, as Professor Dunlop he once said that strategy of using or misusing law as a substitute to traditional military means of achieving war fighting objectives. So it has been clearly seen across in the last 10 to 15 years that regimes across the world are leveraging the usage of law to constrain and to gain advantage of this particular situation. So this is how I understand what lawfare is, and what my paper wanted to achieve out of this whole scenario was that what is the theoretical underpinning of lawfare, and I have specifically had my focus on China and how the usage of lawfare is affecting their internal dimension, which is affecting their domestic policy, and secondly, the international dimension, which is affecting their standing in the strategic and foreign policy in the Indo-Pacific region. And finally, I bring this to notice to everyone that what are the learnings for India and democratic civilizations across the world. So let's start with this whole concept of what is rule of law with Chinese characteristics, and is it a deception or something. So in order to understand the concept of rule of law with Chinese characteristic, one has to understand that the Chinese Communist Party specifically specifically believes that it has to consolidate power, and it consolidates power through law, whether it's the Chinese state or whether it's the Chinese society. So they adhere to this specific combination of rule of law as well as rule of virtue. And the state rejects this whole concept of separation of power, or the separation of the independence of judiciary, which is one of the main tenets of rule of law in Western world. And therefore, the rule of law in synergy of the above has a very interesting take, and it also makes lawfare strategies very effective. So My understanding of what this particular issue is that first it is to pursue a strategic interest, whether it may be internal or whether it may be external, to the dimension to it. Secondly, using tools such as law, as Professor already mentioned earlier, that the three warfare strategy for global influence by China, which is shaping the public opinion, which is a psychological warfare and legal warfare, plays a very important role. And third, targeting the vulnerabilities of vulnerabilities through influence operations and disinformation. So for countries like India and democratic countries, it becomes very important that that it does not become a discourse, or else it creates mistrust in the society and it also creates weakness. And therefore, and the fourth point, what I understand is using diplomacy and leveraging in different domains such as maritime, space, critical technologies, and many others. So this is what we have been consistently looking at. So, in the consequent slides, I will be trying to explain as to what internal dimension of the Xi Jinping thought on rule of law means. And also, I would be clarifying at the end as to does this rule of law with Chinese characteristics or the Xi Jinping thought on rule of law, are they same or are they just means of having a lawfare? So the internal dimension specifically starts with Sun Tzu, the Chinese military strategist, who once said that supreme excellency consists in breaking down the enemy's resistance even without fighting. And even today, this philosophy plays a very influential role in the Chinese military doctrines. And notably, it was in 1996 when President Jiang Zemin, who told a group of Chinese international law experts that we must adapt using international law as a weapon. And if you look into the concept of this whole understanding of um, uh, doctrines which have been given by China, we can note down that unrestricted warfare, which was been written by two PLA colonels, were the foundation of the whole modern warfare or modern lawfare that we see today or what China materializes today. And since then, many of such books, commentaries from academies have started coming out. And these lawfare strategies have been also been used to improve their governance system. So, firstly, by using law to regulate their institutional framework. You must have read in the news that there were crackdowns on the Chinese technological firms, businesses, banking, digital economy, internet finance, and all of these places, all of these emerging technologies were put into or the social credit system. These were one of those. They were part of those to follow the guiding principles which have been set through the Chinese context of lawfare. And secondly, to achieve control over various places like on Hong Kong and Macau, which were been successfully done, as Xi Jinping himself remarked in the recent 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, that we have taken full control over China, over Hong Kong. And finally, one of the most important perspective that which is a leading understanding for all of us is that the plan on building the rule of law in China 2020 to 2025. This plan is another ambitious program of Xi Jinping, which he again he anchors itself in law and governance, taking inspiration from his predecessor Hu Jintao, who was famous for making judicial reforms. And it has been seen actively through this. And the next concept that we understand is the international dimension of Xi Jinping thought and what is the context. So when we look into the international perspective, we have been seeing that China has been consistently using lawfare, whether it is in the South China Sea arbitration or the US-China tariff trade wars or the China-Lithuania custom clearance row. We have been consistently seeing the lawfare strategies being put in, and they have also been active in the maritime domain as well. When they have been using they have been using more increased focus on furthering legal arguments and specialized academy or think tanks with specific push agendas and objectives which are being set by the party. And they have also created a specialized militia, which whose task is only to reclaim island which have been which pose as fishermen and exert influence. With the primary motive is to keep primary motive of pushing the ships and aircraft away from the mainland China. And the PLA-MM, which is the maritime militia's activities, are given cover from the Chinese Coast Guard and PLA Navy. PLA Navy at this point of time is one of the largest navies in the world. So these are the various forms of lawfare and influencing that we have seen in the maritime domain. And the second, one of the most other domain that we have consistently been also seeing is the debt traps, wherein loans are being given and they have been strapped with confidentiality clause. And when a country is not being able to pay it, they specifically seize or they particularly lease that particular area. And we have seen instances as well as Hambantota port of Sri Lanka, Entebbe International Airport of Uganda, and Solomon Island, which we recently saw there was a security agreement which was being signed by them. So when we have such challenges, how are we building legal resilience and bridging the gap for India and as well as in the Indo-Pacific? I have given few 8 recommendations which I understand are for this particular paper of mine. And I have started with understanding the usage of lawfare and preparedness to vulnerabilities. With nations like Israel, Russia, European Union, United States, China, and other are developing their own capabilities in pursuing lawfare strategies. I also believe that India, being the net security provider in the region, should also focus on the preparedness part. Lawfare, I do believe, also gives legitimacy and legality to any country which is pursuing a strategic interest. I have given the example of ICC, how they had decided to open an investigation against Israel by Palestine in the West Bank and the East Jerusalem and Gaza Strip. So, in the eyes of international law, what happens is it gives legitimacy to Palestine and the narrative in the conflict. And similarly, in the case of Philippines, when they filed a case against China, all the other countries they joined in because they were facing the same issues. So this is what I am bringing legal resilience and strengthening the implementation of international law. I do believe at this point of time international law lacks the teeth. International law needs to have more implementation capabilities. It's been, I think, so 5 to 6 years after the South China Sea arbitration, which has been done, and judgment has been passed, and yet there is no issue on the implementation part. And I do also believe that lawfare specifically it deals in the lines of politics, justice, and power. It just plays between all of these three. And therefore, training of specialists in this emerging field is of utmost importance. China, at this point of time, have been using law and history to assert their claims. And it employs academicians, think tanks, lawyers, judges, and diplomats who work in tandem to further their claims through these particular academies. And therefore, I do believe that lawfare cannot be ignored. And China uses these particular laws to defend particular human rights issues in Tibet or Xinjiang, or meddling with disinformation campaigns in Taiwan, or when we look into the using law to deny fair trials to people in Hong Kong. So these are the uses that we see which have been used by China in their core interest. And I also do believe that we need to encourage interdisciplinary study of law and national security. At this point of time, the UGC, which is the body which makes sure of the education in India, has encouraged students to pursue interdisciplinary study. But I strongly believe that there needs to be an interdisciplinary study between law and international studies, international law and national security. because of the simple reason that lawfare specifically is a field of law and national security. And unfortunately, I do believe in India, these subjects are being studied in silo. Like national security has been studied in specific defense and strategic studies curriculum, and law schools do not include national security studies in part of their curriculums, even though they do include international law, but to a very specific as an elective. So I strongly believe that these are the convergences which are essential at this point of time for India. And in order to deal with these, with the Chinese counterpart, because my paper is focused only on China, I believe that the knowledge of the strategic circle, the strategic culture, and the understanding of the Chinese way of thinking is of utmost essential. Because we cannot cancel each other. The moment we cancel each other in geopolitics, we cannot work or we cannot negotiate. And unless and until we don't talk, that won't happen. And I see there's a very mature way of handling the India-China conflict was seen in Galwan Valley incident as well. That we had 15 rounds of talks, core commander talks, and we had got a breakthrough. So yes, I do believe that language capacity building is of almost utmost essential, and in that way we can look at Taiwan. We can get capacity language understanding of Chinese Mandarin in Taiwan as well. And when it comes to the sixth point, which I do believe that there is a need to increase the number of diplomats in India. If India wants to become a Vishwa Guru, which I strongly believe it will, there needs to be diplomats who understand law and geopolitics rather than being just generalist diplomats. India at this point of time maintains a cadre of 850 diplomats in comparison to the other South Asian powers, which are such as South Korea, which has 1,250 diplomats, or China, for that instance, has 4,500 diplomats. So I do believe that there needs to be an increased number of diplomats with acumen of legal knowledge. And coming on to the seventh point that I understand is, with the emergence of lawfare, the officers from armed forces can be trained. The Judge Advocate General Department of the Indian Armed Forces, they specifically should take a lead, as the capacity building efforts on three fronts: the border, the army, the naval waters, the navy, and the air force can bring this into consideration. An integrated decision making task force which only specifically deals with lawfare and can have a liaison with the Ministry of External Affairs can be something which can be materialized, as you in your paper, sir, you have written that there needs to be a center of excellences. So similar to that, if something can be brought out in the Indo-Pacific, can be a real great opportunity. And that's all. An understanding of the legal threat landscape, and I do believe that collaboration and interoperability between nations are of utmost importance at this point of time. Because in order to take care of a bully, you need countries coming together, and countries having the same interests, same agendas coming together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chakrabarti. That was very informative, very detailed, and very compelling presentation. I would like to open up to the audience for questions, but if I may just make a couple of comments and pose one question myself. I think one of the great benefits of your presentation was that you brought out very clearly the breadth of the subject, and looking at China, how China is using both domestic law but then also international law to engage in, again, what we might call lawfare, or what we might more broadly describe as the instrumental use of law for strategic objectives. And we see this with other nations as well, of course. In fact, there is a link between the domestic and the international. So Russia, for instance, has used its domestic law, has changed, amended its constitution in order to isolate itself from some of the international legal obligations. Of course, it then, as we know, is also in the process of withdrawing from some of these international obligations at the international level. But we see a consistent pattern by Russia, by China, of using domestic law not just for the purposes of repressing dissent, for example, internally, but then also using it to achieve objectives on the international stage. The Chinese anti-sanctions law is a good example of that. How the use of again domestic processes is being employed to achieve international effects. So I thought that was a really useful and an insightful part of your paper. I was going to ask you about the sort of what now, what needs to be done, and I think you covered that really well. And I find myself, in violent agreement with many of the points that you mentioned. But building on that, if I may, just given the complexity of the subject and given how many different areas of law and of society are at least potentially subject to legal competition, who should be in the lead of organizing the response? And obviously it cannot be a single actor, I guess. But given the sheer scale of the tasks ahead in responding effectively to the lawfare that we see from actors such as China, which government department needs to be or should be in the lead? Is it a whole government function? Is it just a governmental function? I wonder whether you had any thoughts on that and whether you'd be able to share them, please.
Sir, I strongly believe that there has to be a collaboration between two government departments. Right now, India is going through a transition, and we are transitioning into a tri-service integrated headquarter command. And I do believe that something similar synergy can be brought when Ministry of External Affairs, along with the Indian Armed Forces, can come together. The legal department. That's why I had a focus on the JAG department. So JAG specifically in India, they only focus on the departmental litigations and all the other issues which come up in international humanitarian law. But I do believe that the scope of the JAG officers should be increased, and they should be brought in tandem with the Ministry of External Affairs. They should work in coordination with each other, and that is why this is one thing. And secondly, when it comes to cooperation between countries, I do believe the national interest of countries come into play when this law when lawfare is being acted out, and at that particular point of time, countries should not see as to uh, what are their agendas. They should band together, and like how we have seen Quad coming together as a nation, as all nations with specific interests and interest of the whole area, Indo-Pacific, which we see at this point of time. So therefore, these are my observation, and you may please suggest me something else if you have something in mind, sir.
I think they're perfectly reasonable suggestions. I think one of the great advantages of bringing in the armed forces and legal advisors in the armed forces is precisely this focus on an operational response. May I use this platform to ask a question? Again, Arpan, looking at you, but then also others may want to chip in. As I said, I mean, to me, one of the great joys in participating in this forum is to interact with Indian colleagues, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts and what, from an Indian perspective, the key challenges are in this field, and what are main priorities, what are the areas of law that you find are particularly prone to this legal competition and lawfare that we are seeing. So from an particularly Indian perspective, what is the biggest lawfare threat and problem that you perceive? Arpan, perhaps you would like to kick off and share your thoughts, and then again, if others may want to come in, that'd be extremely useful and amazing.
So I strongly believe that maritime law, maritime domain is one of the important sectors at this point of time that we see lawfare being taken into very heavily. And with the whole construct of Indo-Pacific, and which starts from the Pacific Ocean to the Malacca Strait to extends all the way to the horns of Africa, right? This whole area is where India provides for as a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. So I do believe that maritime region specifically is one of the important points. And you must have recently seen the news that a Chinese research vessel had gone all the way to Sri Lanka, and they had taken refuge there. And it was very close to the nearby nuclear station and the space station, Sriharikota, and all of these places, which were very strategic to India. So yes, I do believe that these are something which are a concern. And secondly, I do believe is also the border areas. How do we negotiate the border areas? So, for example, there is still a lack of understanding on the LAC borders between India and China. And even though we have earlier we had various historical proof that various areas are part of India, there has still been issues which are going on, and the salami slicing tactics that we are continuously seeing in near Philippines, the this Sparta Island or the Paracel Island or the Spratly Island. So it's a similar similar tactics which are being continuously been done near to the borders of India. And India at this point of time is responding to those challenges. And I do believe that in years down the lane, we have to consistently work with our counterparts and make sure that these problems can be solved. That's what is, I think, so from my side.
Thank you. And again, Arpan, I congratulate you on your paper for highlighting some of these difficulties and the challenges and the big picture as well as the details. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the organizers and again express my gratitude for organizing this event and for the invitation to participate today.
Can I say something, please?
You can have your final word.
Okay. So thank you so much, everyone. I got to learn a lot. One of my inspiration here is Professor Bimal Patel as well, sir. So he himself is an expert of national security and international law. So when you were talking about the subject of bringing together the change makers and bringing them to the government, sir himself is one of those. And apart from this, I learned a lot from everyone. And I do believe that India as an individual, India as a country brings more of people who are from the different fields of international law, geopolitics, and national security together, and see a rising India. And so, thank you so much. Thank you.